A weeping little girl approaches a young billionaire and says, "Can you be my dad until my mum comes back?" He listens and breaks down in tears when he discovers who she is. The cold autumn wind cut through the air as Declan Westbrook adjusted the collar of his expensive coat. 6 in the evening, and the sky was already growing dark, painting the downtown skyscrapers with an orange hue that would soon fade. There was no rush to get back to the empty apartment. There never was. Declan walked with firm steps and a distant gaze, as he did every day after leaving his office on the 30th floor of the mirrored glass building that dominated that part of the city. The people around him seemed to move in slow motion. Couples holding hands, men, friends laughing loudly, hurried families. A world to which he did not belong. At 38, Declan had achieved everything he had promised himself when he was just a boy sleeping in makeshift shelters. Money, power, respect. The boy who had to fight for every meal was now the owner of one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast. He stopped in front of a jewelry store window, not out of interest in the displayed pieces, but because his reflection in the glass reminded him of the man he had become. The impeccable suit, the watch that cost more than a car, the perfectly cut dark brown hair, none of it could hide the loneliness that grew inside him with each passing year. "Sir, would you like to see anything specific today?" A voice came from the shop's door. "No, thank you," he replied automatically, turning away. The storefront lights began to turn on, creating a brilliant corridor that seemed to mock his inner emptiness. How many times had he walked this same path? Hundreds, perhaps. And each time he felt more distant from the world around him. His mind was drifting between spreadsheets and numbers when he felt it, something tugging at his suit jacket. It wasn't a strong pull, but it was persistent enough to snap him out of his thoughts. Declan stopped abruptly, confused, and looked down. A small hand was holding the fine fabric of his suit. A dirty hand, with small scratches on the fingers. Declan turned and saw a little girl. She must have been about 5, maybe 6. She had messy, light brown hair, her face streaked with trails of dried and fresh tears that were still falling. She wore a dress that might have once been pink, but was now grimy and too big for her small frame. She carried a worn-out backpack almost her size and hugged a time-worn brown teddy bear. Her eyes were a deep blue and were red and swollen from crying, eyes that carried a weight no child should ever know. "Excuse me," Declan said, uncomfortable. He looked around, searching for an adult who might be with her. The sidewalk was crowded, but no one seemed to notice the lost child. The little girl took a deep breath, as if gathering all the courage in the world. Her lips trembled before the words came out. "Can you be my daddy until Mommy comes back?" The question hit Declan like a punch. He blinked several times, trying to process what he had heard. The request was so unexpected, so impossible, that for a moment he thought he had imagined it. "I says what?" was all he could manage to say. People passed around them, some glancing with curiosity, others looking away as if the scene were invisible. The world continued its rhythm while Declan felt time freeze. He knelt to be at her level, still unsure how to react. His self-preservation instinct told him to walk away, to call the police and to not get involved. But something in that child's eyes stopped him from simply turning his back. "Where is your mother?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. The girl hugged the teddy bear tighter against her chest. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and she whispered so softly that Declan had to lean in to hear, "Mommy went to live in heaven. I don't have anyone." The words fell like stones into the silence that formed between them. Declan felt a lump in his throat. Death. The girl was talking about death, with that terrible innocence children have when dealing with what they don't fully understand. "And your father?" he asked, knowing he probably wouldn't like the answer. "I don't have one," she replied, looking at the ground. "It's always just been me and Mommy." Declan swallowed hard. A crowd of thoughts flooded his mind. He should call social services immediately. It was the correct procedure. It was what any sensible person would do. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to buy time to decide what to do. "Isabella," she answered, still not looking up. "But Mommy called me Bella." The wind grew stronger, and Isabella shivered visibly. She was wearing only the thin dress and without a coat, completely inadequate for the cold weather. "Are you hungry, Isabella?" The question came out almost automatically. He remembered the feeling of hunger all too well. She nodded shyly. Let's get something to eat and you can tell me more, okay?" Declan surprised himself with his own words. He wasn't one to get involved. He wasn't one to stray from his path. He wasn't one to offer help. Isabella looked up at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Her eyes, despite the tears, had an intensity that seemed to evaluate Declan's every move. "Do you promise you won't leave me alone?" The question was simple, but the weight behind it was immense. Declan hesitated. He couldn't make such a promise. It would be irresponsible. But he also couldn't leave her there, alone in the cold. "Let's take it one step at a time," he replied carefully. "First, let's get something warm to eat." He extended his hand but didn't touch her. He let her decide if she trusted him enough. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, Isabella placed her small, cold hand in his. It was as cold as ice. Declan led her a few blocks until he found a quiet cafe, away from the hustle and bustle of the main avenue. It was a small place with soft lighting and few tables, the kind of establishment he frequented when he needed to think. The waitress looked at them with curiosity as they entered. A man in an expensive suit and a visibly needy little girl were not the most common combination. Declan ignored the look and asked for a table in the back. "A hot chocolate and a sandwich, please," he ordered for Isabella, who nodded shyly, "and a coffee for me." While they waited, Declan watched the girl. She placed the teddy bear on the table carefully, as if it was something precious. Her small hands, though dirty, moved with a delicate grace. "Isabella, can you tell me what happened? Where did you live?" She looked down, fiddling with the edge of the table. "I lived with Mommy in a small apartment, but after she went away, the landlady said I couldn't stay anymore." "When did this happen?" "3 days ago," she answered. "The lady let me stay until this morning. She said she was going to call someone to get me, but I ran away." The hot chocolate and sandwich arrived. Isabella looked at the food as if it were a treasure. She started eating slowly at first, but soon hunger took over, and she devoured the sandwich with urgency. "Slow down," Declan cautioned gently. "There's more if you want it." Isabella nodded, slowing her pace. The chocolate left a brown mustache above her lips, and for a single second, Declan felt the urge to smile. "Why did you run away instead of waiting for someone to come get you?" Isabella stopped eating and hugged her teddy bear again. "The lady said I was going to a place with lots of kids without parents. She said I might never come home again." She paused. "But I want to go home when Mommy—" Her voice faltered, and she didn't finish the sentence. Declan knew he should explain it to her. Tell her that her mother wasn't coming back, that there was no coming back, but he couldn't. The words just wouldn't come out. "You don't have any other relatives? Grandparents? Uncles?" "No, it was just me and Mommy. She always said so." "And at school? Is there anyone there who can help?" "Mommy homeschooled me. She said when I turned 6 I would go to a big school." Each answer closed off more possibilities. Declan glanced at his watch. It was almost 8 at night. Social services would likely only be available the next morning. "Where have you been sleeping the last few nights, Isabella?" She shrugged her shoulders. "At our place. I would hide when the lady came. But today she found me and kicked me out." "And why did you choose me to ask for help?" Isabella looked up for the first time since they had started talking. There was something in the way she looked. Direct, honest, without the filters adults develop. "You looked sad, like me. And Mommy used to say that sad people understand other sad people." The answer completely disarmed Declan. He felt as if someone had pried open his ribcage and exposed his heart. How could a 5-year-old see what no one else did? "And also," she continued softly, "you have eyes like my Mommy's." Declan took a deep breath, trying to maintain control of his emotions. He knew what he had to do. Call the police. Wait for social services. It was the correct procedure. It was what any sensible person would do. But then he remembered himself at 10 years old, when he lost his parents in an accident and was taken to a shelter. He remembered the fear, the loneliness, the feeling of abandonment. He remembered the sleepless nights, wishing anyone would show up and say everything would be okay. Isabella had finished the sandwich and was now just holding the mug of hot chocolate between her small hands, enjoying the warmth. "Where are you going to sleep tonight?" The question came out almost as a whisper. She shrugged again, a gesture too adult for such a small child. Declan closed his eyes for a moment. What he was considering was insane. It was reckless. It was completely out of his cautious, planned character. But the thought of leaving this girl to spend the night on the streets, alone and vulnerable, caused a tightness in his chest he couldn't ignore. "Isabella," he said finally, "I think you should come with me tonight. Just for tonight. Tomorrow morning we'll find help, someone who can take proper care of you." Her eyes lit up with a hope so pure that Declan almost looked away, feeling unworthy. "Are you going to be my daddy?" The question was innocent, but its weight was crushing. Declan took a deep breath. "So it's the best I can promise right now," he answered carefully. For Isabella, that seemed to be enough. She nodded seriously, as if they had just sealed an important deal. Declan paid the bill and stood up, still unsure if he was doing the right thing. Probably not, but he also knew he couldn't live with himself if he abandoned her. "Ready?" he asked, extending his hand. Isabella picked up her teddy bear, adjusted her backpack and took his hand. This time it was warmer. As they walked out of the cafe, Declan knew something had irrevocably changed. The path he always walked alone now had an unexpected companion. And that child's impossible request had done something none of his financial successes ever could. It had touched a part of him he had long considered dead. "I'll take care of you from now on," he said softly, more to himself than to her, as they stepped out into the cold night. The private elevator opened directly into Declan's penthouse. Isabella clutched her backpack to her chest, her eyes wide as she took in the enormous apartment stretching out before her. Walls of glass revealed the illuminated city below, like an ocean of artificial stars. "This is where I live," Declan said, turning on the lights automatically with a voice command. Isabella didn't respond. Her steps were hesitant, as if she were afraid of breaking something just by being there. The contrast between her dirty dress and the impeccable surroundings couldn't be greater. "You must be tired," Declan commented, noticing the girl's discomfort. "I'll show you where you can sleep." She followed him in silence, keeping a cautious distance. The teddy bear, her only companion, remained clutched tightly to her chest. The guest room had never been used. It was spacious, with a bed far too large for such a small child. The white walls and minimalist decor seemed too cold and impersonal to welcome someone like Isabella. "You can stay here," Declan said, turning on the lamp beside the bed. "And the bathroom is through that door. There are clean towels and—" He stopped when he realized Isabella hadn't entered the room. She remained at the doorway, as if an invisible barrier were stopping her. "Is everything okay? You don't like the room?" Isabella hugged her teddy bear tighter, shaking her head. Her eyes scanned the space as if searching for traps. "It's too big," she finally whispered. Declan had never considered that a problem. But for a child used to a small space, perhaps it was intimidating. "I understand. Do you want to stay somewhere else?" She shrugged, still not looking directly at him. "Well, for now you can stay in the living room. There's a comfortable sofa there." Isabella followed Declan back to the living room. The dark leather sofa seemed less intimidating than the empty bedroom. She sat on the edge, still clinging to her teddy bear and backpack, as if she might need to flee at any moment. Declan found a blanket and a pillow in a closet. "You must be hungry again. Want something to eat?" "No, thank you," she answered in a low voice, though her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. "I'll fix something simple," he decided, ignoring her refusal. In the kitchen, Declan realized he didn't have many options suitable for a child. He opened the refrigerator and found only leftover Thai food, some fruit and yogurt. He opted for the yogurt and an apple, cut into small pieces. When he returned to the living room, he found Isabella in the exact same position, stiff and alert. Her eyes followed his every move. "Here," he offered the plate. "It's not much, but tomorrow we'll buy proper food." She accepted the plate carefully but didn't eat immediately. She waited for Declan to take a few steps back before bringing the first piece of apple to her mouth. The silence between them was heavy. Not the kind of silence Declan was used to, the one he chose and enjoyed. This was different, laden with unspoken expectations and unexpressed fears. "Would you like to take a shower before you sleep?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Isabella nodded, but her face showed concern. Can I take Mr. Buttons?" "Mr. Buttons?" She held up the worn-out teddy bear slightly. "Oh, of course you can," Declan replied, almost smiling at the name. "I'll show you where everything is." In the hallway bathroom, he quickly explained how the shower worked and left clean towels on the counter. "There's soap and shampoo there. If you need help, just call. I'll be in the living room." Isabella nodded, still holding Mr. Buttons. When Declan left and closed the door, he stood outside for a few seconds. The sound of running water started, and he finally relaxed his shoulders a bit. Back in the living room, Declan wondered what he had done. In less than 3 hours, his organized and predictable life had been completely upended. Now there was an orphan in his apartment, a responsibility he was not prepared for. He picked up his phone several times, considering calling social services, even at that hour of the night. It would be the sensible thing to do. It would be the responsible thing. It would be the easiest thing. But every time he was about to dial, he remembered Isabella's eyes, the innocent question, "Mr. Buttons," and he couldn't do it. The sound of the water stopped, and a few minutes later, Isabella appeared in the living room. She was cleaner, with wet hair falling over her shoulders. She was still wearing the same dirty dress, as she had no other clothes. "Feeling better?" Declan asked. She nodded, still not speaking. She returned to the same spot on the sofa, this time wrapping herself in the blanket Declan had left. "Tomorrow we'll buy you new clothes." Isabella looked at him with suspicion, as if trying to understand his true intentions. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, her voice so low that Declan had to lean in to hear. The question caught him off guard. Why? Indeed. He didn't have an answer, or maybe he had too many, none of them simple enough to explain to a child. "Because you needed help," he replied simply. Isabella kept looking at him as if expecting more. When she realized nothing more was coming, she went back to hugging her teddy bear. "Mummy said that not all people are good," she said after a long silence. "She said not to trust strangers." "Your mother was right," Declan answered honestly. "That's good advice. But I trusted you." The statement hung in the air like both an accusation and a confession. "I'm trying not to disappoint your trust," he said, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. Isabella lowered her eyes to Mr. Buttons, adjusting one of the buttons that gave the bear its name. "Can you turn on that light?" She pointed to the nearest lamp. "I don't really like the dark." Declan granted her request. "Oh, I'll leave it on all night if you want." She thanked him with a nod and settled onto the sofa, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Her eyes were beginning to grow heavy with exhaustion. "Try to get some sleep," Declan suggested. "I'll be in that room over there if you need anything." He walked away, leaving his own bedroom door ajar. He lay on the bed without changing his clothes, exhausted but unable to sleep. The day's events replayed in his mind like a constant loop. The hours passed. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:17 a.m. when Declan heard it. It was a low sound, almost imperceptible, a stifled sob, the kind someone makes when trying to cry without being noticed. He got up slowly and walked to the door. In the dim light of the living room, he could see Isabella sitting on the sofa, hugging her knees to her chest. Her shoulders trembled with silent crying. Declan hesitated. He didn't know how to comfort a child. He didn't know what to say to ease such a deep pain. He didn't know how to be what she needed. But he knew he couldn't just ignore it. He approached with soft steps so as not to startle her. "Isabella." She lifted her tear-streaked face, trying uselessly to dry her eyes with the backs of her hands. "Sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to wake you." "You didn't wake me," he replied, sitting at a respectful distance. "I couldn't sleep." Silence returned, broken only by Isabella's occasional sobs. Declan didn't ask why she was crying. The answer was all too obvious. "I miss my mommy so much." she said finally, the words coming out choked with restrained emotion. So much. The simple sincerity of the confession hit Declan like a wave. He remembered when he lost his own parents, the emptiness he felt, the sensation of being completely alone in the world. "I know," he replied softly. "I know you do." Isabella wiped away another tear. "When is Mommy coming back from heaven?" The question broke something inside him. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that some departures are final? How do you talk about death without destroying the little hope she had left? "Isabella," he began, choosing his words carefully, "when someone goes to heaven, they can't come back." She stared at him, processing the information. Her large eyes reflected the dim light of the lamp. "Never ever, never ever," he confirmed gently. Fresh tears welled up, silent and heavy. Isabella hugged Mr. Buttons tighter, as if he could protect her from the truth. "But you can always remember her," Declan continued. "You can always feel the love she had for you." Isabella didn't answer. She continued to cry, her small body shaking with the effort of holding back her sobs. Declan felt an impulse to touch her, to offer some physical comfort. But he held back. He respected her space, her grief, her distrust. Instead, he just remained there, a silent presence beside her. It was then that he realized he was scared. Not the kind of fear he knew well, of failing in business, of making wrong decisions, of losing money. This was a new and different fear. The fear of caring, of making room in his life for someone, of letting someone else's story become intertwined with his. For the first time in years, Declan Westbrook felt something beyond ambition or the satisfaction of achieved goals. He felt compassion, and that terrified him more than any financial crisis ever could. "Can you stay here?" Isabella's small voice brought him back. "Just until I fall asleep." Declan nodded, unable to deny that simple request. "I'll stay right here," he promised. "Try to get some sleep." Isabella lay down again, still holding the teddy bear. Her eyes remained open for some time, fixed on the ceiling before finally giving in to exhaustion. Declan watched her sleep, seeing how her breathing gradually calmed. On her sleeping face there were still traces of tears, but there was also a momentary peace, a truce in the silent battle she was fighting against the cruel reality she had encountered so early. And he stayed there, sitting on the floor next to the sofa, afraid to move away and break the promise he had made. Fearing even more what would happen when the sun rose and he had to decide what to do next. The morning light filtered through the large windows of the penthouse, creating luminous patterns on the dark wood floor. Declan woke with a start, realizing he had fallen asleep sitting on the floor, next to the sofa where Isabella was sleeping. His neck ached from the uncomfortable position. He stood up slowly, trying not to make a sound. Isabella was still sleeping soundly, clutching Mr. Buttons, the blanket wrapped around her small body. Declan checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. Normally, at this hour, he would already be on his second coffee and reviewing emails on his way to the office. But today, nothing would be normal. He went to the kitchen and made coffee. While the machine worked, he picked up his phone and sent a message to his assistant. "I won't be in the office today. Personal matter. Reschedule all meetings." The reply came almost immediately. "Of course, Mr. Westbrook. Is everything all right?" "Nothing to worry about," he typed, knowing it was a lie. He drank his coffee in silence, watching Isabella sleep. Her face was serene now, different from the scared and distrustful expression of the previous night. She seemed even smaller in the daylight, even more fragile. Around 8 o'clock, she began to stir. She opened her eyes slowly, confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. For a moment, her face showed panic, until she saw Declan and seemed to remember where she was. "Good morning," he said, keeping his distance. Isabella sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Good morning," she replied in a low voice. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded, still hugging her teddy bear. "Are you hungry? I can make you something to eat." Isabella looked around as if searching for something. Can I go to the bathroom first?" "Of course." Declan pointed down the hall. "It's the second door." While she was in the bathroom, Declan rummaged through the kitchen. He had few foods suitable for a child. He found cereal, milk, and some fruit. It would have to do for now. Isabella returned, still wearing the same dirty dress. Her hair was messy, but she had tried to fix it with her hands. I made some cereal with milk. Do you like it? She approached the table cautiously and climbed onto the chair. She nodded affirmatively. Thank you, she said softly, starting to eat. Declan sat on the other side of the table, giving her space. He watched how she ate slowly, careful not to spill anything. Isabella, he began, trying to sound casual. We need to buy some things for you. New clothes, shoes, a toothbrush. What do you think? She stopped eating for a moment, looking at him cautiously. Why? The question caught him off guard. Why would a child question getting new things? Well, you need clean clothes, and other things too. Isabella lowered her eyes to the bowl. The landlady said I was going to a place where they would give me old clothes from other kids. Declan understood then. She still thought she was being taken to a shelter. We're not going to that place today, he said carefully, avoiding making promises he couldn't keep. Today we're just going to buy what you need. She didn't seem entirely convinced, but continued eating in silence. After breakfast, Declan realized another problem. He didn't have a car with a child seat, and he didn't know how to transport Isabella safely. He decided to call a private car service that offered vehicles with child seats. We're leaving in a few minutes, he explained to Isabella. The car is coming to pick us up. She nodded, looking nervous at the idea. When the car arrived, Isabella held her backpack and Mr. Buttons tightly to her chest, as if afraid someone would take them from her. In the elevator, she stood as far away from Declan as possible, leaning against the wall. The morning was clear but cold. Isabella shivered when they left the building. Declan took off his own coat and put it over her shoulders, even though it was far too big. Thank you, she murmured, almost disappearing under the fabric. The driver was waiting for them. He was a middle-aged man with a kind expression. Good morning, Mr. Westbrook, he greeted, opening the door. Isabella stopped, looking at the car with suspicion. It's okay, Declan assured her. We're just going shopping. She got in hesitantly and allowed Declan to help her with the child seat safety belt. During the ride, Isabella remained silent, watching the city through the window. Her eyes registered everything: the tall buildings, the hurried people on the sidewalks, the colorful shop windows. Where are we going? She finally asked. To a mall, Declan replied. There are several stores there where we can find what you need. When they arrived, the mall had just opened. There were few people, which was a relief to Declan. Isabella got out of the car carefully, still wrapped in the oversized coat. Shall we go in? Declan asked, offering his hand. Isabella looked at his extended hand but didn't take it. Instead, she stayed very close to him, almost touching his side, like a small, silent shadow. They entered a large department store. The children's section was on the second floor. Declan had never bought children's clothes before and felt completely lost among the colorful racks. Can I help you? A saleswoman approached, smiling. Yes, please, Declan replied, relieved. We need, well, everything, really. Clothes, shoes, pajamas. The saleswoman looked at Isabella, noticing the dirty dress under the large coat. Her smile faltered for a moment, but she maintained her professionalism. Of course, what's her size? Declan looked at Isabella, realizing he had no idea. She's 5, he answered, as if age were a size measurement. The saleswoman smiled kindly. Let's check for the right size. Come with me, dear. Isabella shrank back, clinging to Declan's leg. It's okay, he assured her. She's just going to help us find clothes that fit you. Isabella looked at the saleswoman with suspicion, but allowed her to guide them to the fitting rooms. Declan followed closely, feeling a strange anxiety at being separated from her, even by a few feet. The saleswoman was patient and gentle, respecting Isabella's space. She brought several simple items: t-shirts, pants, dresses, light jackets, and a soft pajama set. You can choose the colors you like, Declan told Isabella when the saleswoman showed them the options. Isabella seemed confused by the idea of choosing. She looked at the clothes as if it were a test she could fail. The purple one is pretty, she said finally, pointing to a t-shirt. Do you like purple? Declan asked, filing the information away. She nodded shyly. Then we'll get the purple things, and other colors too, so you have options. The saleswoman smiled and set aside more items in shades of purple and lilac. Isabella tried on some clothes, emerging from the fitting room in a purple t-shirt and jeans that fit her perfectly. "What do you think?" Declan asked. Isabella looked at herself in the mirror, touching the new fabric with her fingertips as if she couldn't believe it. "It's pretty," she said softly. "Want to wear it now? We can ask them to remove the tags." She nodded, and for the first time, a small smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Declan asked the saleswoman to remove the tags from the clothes Isabella was wearing. They also chose shoes, comfortable sneakers, and simple flats. "We also need other things," Declan remembered. "A toothbrush, shampoo, things like that." The saleswoman directed them to the children's hygiene section. Isabella was particularly interested in a purple toothbrush with sparkling stars. "Can I have this one?" she asked, more comfortable making requests now. "Of course," Declan replied, placing it in the shopping cart along with shampoo, conditioner, and other basic items. They passed through the toy section, and Declan noticed how Isabella's eyes lit up at the sight of the teddy bears. He picked up a particularly soft caramel-colored one. "Do you think Mr. Buttons would like a friend?" Isabella looked at the new bear and then at her own, worn with time. After a moment of consideration, she shook her head. "He likes being the only one," she explained seriously. Declan smiled at the unexpected answer and put the bear back on the shelf. Instead, he picked up some children's books and a set of colored pencils with a drawing pad. When they finished shopping, they had several bags. Isabella looked like a different child with the new clothes, combed hair and shoes that actually fit her small feet. They left the store and walked through the mall. It was almost lunchtime. "Are you hungry?" Declan asked. Isabella nodded. "Let's have lunch right here then." They chose a simple restaurant that served kids meals. Isabella ordered pasta with tomato sauce, and Declan opted for a salad. As they ate, he noticed how she seemed less tense. There was still caution in her movements, but the initial fear was beginning to fade. "Are you enjoying the food?" "Yes," she replied. "Mommy used to make pasta like this." It was the first time she had mentioned her mother without crying. After lunch, they walked towards the mall's exit. There were more people now, and the streets were bustling. When they reached the sidewalk, they needed to cross to get to the spot where the car was waiting. Declan instinctively held out his hand. "Let's cross." "Hold my hand." Isabella looked at his extended hand. There was a moment of hesitation, her eyes evaluating the gesture, as if deciding if she could trust him. Then, slowly, she placed her small hand in his. Her tiny fingers closed around his with surprising firmness. And as they started to cross the street together, Declan looked down and saw it, a small smile on Isabella's lips. It was just a subtle curve at the corners of her mouth, almost imperceptible. But it was there, and something inside Declan's chest warmed in a way he hadn't felt in years. A forgotten sense of human connection, of meaning beyond the numbers in his bank account and the contracts on his desk. On the way back to the apartment, Isabella slept in the back seat, exhausted from the morning of shopping. Declan watched her in the rearview mirror, noticing how she looked more relaxed, less on the verge of a constant breakdown. When they arrived, he woke her gently. "Isabella, we're here." She opened her eyes slowly, momentarily confused, but soon recognized where she was. He carried the bags up, and they entered the elevator. In the apartment, Declan helped her organize the new clothes in the guest room. "You can sleep here tonight if you want," he suggested. "First, or you can stay in the living room again if you prefer." "I can try the room," she replied, surprised by her own bravery. The following days brought a new routine. Declan worked remotely, something he had never done before. He set up a temporary space in the living room for Isabella to draw and read, while he answered emails and participated in video conferences. Isabella was still quiet, but she slowly began to open up. On the third night, as they had dinner together, she looked at Declan with curiosity. "Do you have any kids?" she asked in a low voice. The question surprised him. "No," he answered simply. Isabella continued eating for a moment. absorbing the information. Why not? Declan pondered how to answer. I never got married, and people usually have kids when they're married. Not always, she commented, playing with her fork. My friend down the street had a dad, but her mom wasn't married to him. That's true, Declan agreed. There are many different kinds of families. Isabella fell silent again, thoughtful. After a few minutes, she asked another question. Why do you live alone in this big house? Declan smiled slightly. I guess I never really thought about it. I bought this apartment because I could, and because it has a beautiful view of the city. It's too big for just one person, Isabella observed with the direct honesty only children possess. You're right, Declan admitted. It is too big. The next morning, as they had breakfast, Isabella looked at him with those piercing blue eyes. Did your mommy go to live in heaven too? The question hit Declan like a punch. It had been years since he had spoken about his mother, about the loss he suffered as a child. Yes, he answered after a moment. My mother went to live in heaven when I was 8 years old. Isabella's eyes widened. Were you all alone? Like me? Not exactly like you, Declan explained carefully. I still had my father. I continued to live with him. Did your father take care of you? Yes, he worked a lot, so we spent less time together than I would have liked. But he did the best he could. Isabella hugged Mr. Buttons, who now accompanied her to every meal. Did you miss your mum? A lot, Declan admitted, surprised by his own honesty. I still do, sometimes. She nodded, as if she understood perfectly what he meant. And where is your father now? He went to live in heaven too, but I was already an adult when that happened. Isabella processed the information, her face too serious for someone so young. So you were all alone again? The question was simple, but the answer was complex. Declan had built his life, his company, his financial empire. But as for true human connections, I had my work, my colleagues, he replied. But yes, in a way I was alone. Isabella reached her small hand across the table and, to Declan's surprise, lightly touched his fingers. Now you have me, she said, with the profound simplicity of childhood. And I have you. The comment caught him completely off guard. Declan felt something catch in his throat, an emotion he couldn't name. He didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded, accepting that simple truth. In the days that followed, the questions continued. Isabella wanted to know everything about him, his work, his home, his favorite foods. Each answer seemed to build a bridge between them, closing the initial distance. A week after Isabella's arrival, Declan was reading documents on the sofa while she drew at the coffee table. Suddenly, she held up the paper. I made this for you, she said, holding out the drawing. It was a simple picture. 2 stick figures, one big and one small, holding hands. Above them, a bright yellow sun, and a house that looked more like a box with windows. That's us, Isabella explained, pointing, and this is our house. Declan took the drawing carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure. It's beautiful, he said, feeling a lump in his throat. Thank you. Isabella smiled, not just a small smile this time, but a full smile that lit up her entire face. Oh, I'll make another one tomorrow. That night, after Isabella had fallen asleep, Declan stared at the drawing for a long time. He realized that, without planning it, without expecting it, a bond was forming between them, a bond he never imagined was possible. And for the first time in many years, the silent, perfect penthouse was starting to feel less like an empty space and more like a place that could, one day, be called a home. The day began like the ones before. Declan woke up early, made coffee, and answered a few urgent emails before Isabella awoke. Establishing a routine seemed important for both of them. It brought a sense of normalcy to a situation that was far from normal. The golden morning light streamed through the penthouse's large windows, creating patterns on the kitchen floor. Declan watched the city below, the tiny people moving like ants, going to their jobs, their ordinary lives. A week ago, he would have been one of those people. Now he was here, living a kind of life he never imagined. The sound of soft footsteps made him turn. Isabella appeared at the kitchen doorway, dressed in purple pajamas, her brown hair messy from sleep. Mr. Buttons, as always, was with her, held securely in her arms. Good morning, Declan smiled slightly. Sleep well? Isabella nodded, rubbing her eyes. In the last few days, she had started sleeping in the guest room without any problems. The nightmares that had woken her up crying in the first few nights had subsided. Want pancakes for breakfast? Declan asked. I found a simple recipe online. Isabella looked surprised. You know how to make pancakes? Not really, he admitted with a slight smile. But I think I can try. It can't be harder than analyzing a merger agreement, right? Isabella didn't understand the comparison, but smiled anyway. Can I help? Mommy used to let me help in the kitchen sometimes. Of course, Declan replied, trying to ignore the pang in his chest he felt whenever she mentioned her mother. You can be my pancake assistant. He placed a stool near the counter so Isabella could reach. Carefully, he showed her how to crack the eggs and measure the flour. She followed his instructions seriously, her tongue stuck between her teeth in concentration as she slowly stirred the batter. Am I doing it right? She asked, looking up. Perfectly, Declan assured her. You're an excellent assistant. A small smile appeared on her face, lighting up her eyes for a moment. These brief moments of joy were becoming more frequent, and each one made Declan feel an inexplicable warmth in his chest. When the batter was ready, he heated the pan and started cooking the pancakes. The first few came out misshapen, prompting giggles from Isabella. Gradually, however, he got the hang of it, and soon there was a stack of golden pancakes in the center of the table. They sat down to eat, Isabella's legs dangling from the chair, still too small to reach the floor. Declan poured maple syrup over the pancakes and cut hers into small pieces. I also made hot chocolate, he said, placing a steaming mug in front of her. Careful, it's hot. Isabella picked up the mug with both hands, gently blowing on the surface of the liquid, just as she had seen Declan do with his coffee. It was such an adult, imitative gesture that he had to suppress a smile. A comfortable silence settled as they ate. It was no longer the tense silence of the first few days, filled with distrust and fear. It was something quieter, as if words weren't always necessary. Isabella ate half of her pancake before putting down her fork. Her blue eyes, usually evasive, now stared directly at the mug of hot chocolate between her hands. Mommy used to make hot chocolate when I was sick, she said suddenly, her voice almost a whisper. Declan stopped eating, sensing that something important was about to happen. He waited, giving her space to continue. She would put in little marshmallows that floated, Isabella continued, looking at the dark liquid. She said they were magic boats that would carry the sickness away. A sad smile crossed her face for an instant, disappearing as quickly as it came. Her small fingers squeezed the mug as if seeking warmth or comfort. I miss that, she added softly. Declan swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. Next time we can add marshmallows too, he offered, his voice huskier than he intended. Isabella nodded, but her gaze remained distant, lost in memories. For a few moments, only the sound of the cars below filled the kitchen. Mommy got very sick, she said finally, still holding the cup with both hands. There was a restrained quality to her voice, as if she were trying to be more grown up than her years allowed. She couldn't work. One day she just stopped breathing. The words came out simple, direct, devastating in their childlike simplicity. There were no elaborate euphemisms, just the raw truth, as seen through the eyes of a child. Declan felt as if something were crushing his chest. He fought back the tears that threatened to form, knowing instinctively that Isabella needed his strength at that moment, not his fragility. I tried to wake her up, Isabella continued, her voice growing even quieter. I shook her and called her, but she didn't wake up. So I stayed by her side until the landlady came in and started screaming. A tear rolled down her small face, falling directly into the chocolate. Isabella made no sound, no sob. She just let the tears fall silently, as if she were used to crying unnoticed. The lady took me to her room while people in white came and took Mommy away, she continued. Then the lady said I couldn't stay there anymore because Mommy wasn't going to pay the rent. Declan took a deep breath, trying to contain the wave of emotions hitting him. Anger at the woman who had kicked out a child, sadness for the loss Isabella had suffered, admiration for the way she was facing it all. How long were you alone after your mother? He couldn't finish the sentence. 3 days, Isabella answered. The lady said I could stay until the end of the week, But then I had to leave. I stayed there, sleeping in our bed, until she made me get out. 3 days. A 5-year-old child alone with her grief for 3 days. Declan closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the cruelty of the situation. "You are very brave, Isabella," he said finally, his voice almost failing. She looked at him, genuinely confused. "I'm not brave. I was very scared." "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave," Declan explained gently. "Bravery is carrying on even when you're scared. And that's exactly what you did." Isabella pondered this, tilting her head slightly. "Mommy used to say I was strong like a little tree," she shared. "That even when the wind blows hard, little trees can bend without breaking." Declan smiled through the tears he could no longer hold back. "Your mother was a very wise woman." Isabella nodded, a faint smile forming between her tears. She was the smartest person in the whole wide world. They fell silent again, breakfast forgotten between them. Declan realized, with a sudden and overwhelming clarity, the depth of the pain this little person carried. And yet there she was, drinking hot chocolate, helping make pancakes, finding moments of smiles between the tears. Isabella had a strength that many adults he knew did not possess, a resilience that came not from hardness, but from the ability to bend without breaking, like the little tree her mother had described. "You know something," Declan said softly. "So I think your mother was right. You really are as strong as a little tree." Isabella looked up at him, a light of hope shining through her tears. In that silent moment between them, something changed, a mutual understanding, a recognition of shared pain. "Can we buy marshmallows today?" she asked, her small voice breaking the silence. "So of course we can," Declan replied, grateful for the chance to do something, anything to bring a little comfort into her life. "We'll buy the smallest ones we can find so they can float like magic boats." Isabella nodded, taking another sip of her chocolate. When she lowered the mug, there was a small brown smudge above her upper lip. A chocolate mustache, so innocent and childlike that it contrasted painfully with the forced maturity of her earlier words. Declan realized then that, despite everything she had been through, Isabella was still just a child who needed marshmallows shaped like boats, pancakes for breakfast, someone to listen to her, and who, above all, cared. And in that simple moment, on an ordinary morning, he silently promised himself that he would be that person for her, for as long as it took. The doorbell rang at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. Declan was in the middle of a video conference, discussing the details of an important acquisition. Isabella was drawing quietly at the coffee table, Mr. Button sitting beside her like an attentive supervisor. The unexpected sound made Declan frown. He wasn't expecting anyone. In the nearly 10 days since Isabella had arrived, he had kept the outside world at a distance, creating a temporary bubble where only the two of them existed. "Give me a minute," he asked the executives on the screen, putting the meeting on hold. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Declan stood up, instinctively adjusting his tie. Even working from home, he maintained the habit of dressing formally for video conferences. "Who is it?" Isabella asked, looking up from her drawing. "I don't know. Stay here. I'll go see." Declan walked to the door, an uneasy feeling growing in his stomach. When he looked through the peephole, he saw a man and a woman in the hallway. Both were dressed in formal but discreet clothing, and the woman was holding a folder. He took a deep breath before opening the door. "Mr. Declan Westbrook?" the woman asked, her tone professional but not hostile. "Yes, that's me. My name is Karen Matthews from the Department of Child Services. This is my colleague, David Chen. May we come in? We'd like to talk to you about Isabella Crawford." The floor seemed to disappear from under Declan's feet. Of course, this would happen eventually. He knew it. He had thought about it every day. But somehow, he was still not prepared. "Tyus, how did you find out?" was all he could manage to ask. "We received a report from the landlady who rented a room to Evelyn Crawford, Isabella's mother," David explained. "She reported that the girl had disappeared after her mother's passing. We began investigating, and your name came up when we reviewed security camera footage from the area." Declan nodded slowly. Of course there would be cameras. Of course he would be identified. It was inevitable. "May I see your identification, please?" he asked, buying time to gather his thoughts. Both showed official badges. They were legitimate. "Please, come in," Declan finally said, opening the door wider. He led them down the hall, mentally rehearsing what he would say. How would he explain that he had taken a child home without notifying the authorities? How would he justify his actions? When they reached the living room, Isabella was no longer at the table. Declan looked around, confused, until he noticed movement behind the large leather armchair in the corner of the room. She had hidden, only her blue eyes visible, watching the strangers with suspicion. "Isabella," he called softly. "We have visitors. They are people who want to talk with us." She didn't respond or come out from her hiding spot. Instead, she clutched the teddy bear tighter against her chest, as if it could protect her. "Isabella," the social worker, Karen, said in a gentle voice, bending down a little. "You don't need to be afraid, we just want to talk, okay?" Isabella looked at Declan, a silent question in her eyes. He nodded slightly, trying to convey a confidence he didn't feel. "Mr. Westbrook, we need to discuss the situation," David said. "Perhaps we could speak in private first." "Of course," Declan replied, glancing at Isabella again. "I'll be right in the kitchen, okay? You can keep drawing." She didn't move from her hiding spot, but gave a slight nod. In the kitchen, Declan offered coffee, which they both declined. They sat at the table, and he felt strangely as if he were in one of his own corporate interrogations. Only this time, he was the one being questioned. "Mr. Westbrook," Karen began, opening her folder, "we understand that you found Isabella approximately 10 days ago after her mother's passing. Is that correct?" "Yes," Declan confirmed. "She approached me on the street. She was alone, hungry and scared. And you took her to your home," David continued, not as an accusation but as a statement of fact. "Yes, it was late. She had nowhere to go. I couldn't just leave her on the street." Karen nodded. "We understand your concern, Mr. Westbrook. However, the protocol in these situations would be to immediately contact the proper authorities." Declan felt his face flush. "I know, I should have, but—" He paused, searching for the right words. "She was so scared, so vulnerable. I thought I'd take her to a safe place first and deal with the situation the next day." "And why didn't you do so the next day?" David asked, his tone still neutral. The question hit Declan like a punch. Why, indeed? He had planned to call the authorities. He had considered it several times. But every morning, seeing Isabella sleeping peacefully or trying to smile despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to make the call. "I don't have a good answer for that," he admitted finally. I think I wanted to give her a bit of stability before subjecting her to more changes." The social workers exchanged a look that Declan couldn't interpret. "Mr. Westbrook," Karen said, her voice softening slightly, "we're not here to judge you. From what we can see at first glance, Isabella appears to be well cared for. However, there are legal procedures that must be followed." "I understand," Declan replied, feeling a growing weight in his chest. "Do you have any relation to Isabella or her mother, Evelyn Crawford?" David asked. "No," Declan replied automatically. Then he hesitated, remembering something Isabella had said. "Actually, I knew Evelyn many years ago. We were friends." Again, the social workers exchanged glances. "Does Isabella have any other relatives?" Declan asked. "That's what we're trying to determine," Karen explained. "So far, we haven't identified any living relatives. Evelyn Crawford was an only child. Her parents are deceased. There is no father listed on Isabella's birth certificate." Declan absorbed the information, feeling a contradictory mix of relief and concern. With no relatives, where would Isabella go? "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice lower than he intended. "We need to speak with Isabella," David replied, "assess her situation, her well-being, and then determine the best course of action." "Can she stay with me in the meantime?" Declan asked, trying to keep his tone casual as if the answer didn't matter as much as it truly did. "Mr. Westbrook," Karen said gently, "you have no legal relationship with Isabella. You are not a relative, not a designated guardian. Legally, we cannot simply leave her here." The words felt like stones in Declan's stomach. "But she's safe here," he argued, a rising desperation in his voice. "She's well cared for. She has food, clean clothes, a place to sleep. She's starting to feel safe again." "We understand that," David replied, "and we will take everything into consideration. But there are procedures. Isabella will need to go to a temporary foster home while the case is evaluated." "An orphanage, you mean?" Declan said, unable to hide the bitterness in his voice. "A temporary shelter," Karen corrected gently. "So, where she will be well cared for until a permanent solution is found." Declan closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control his emotions. When he opened them again, his expression had changed. He was no longer the confused, defensive man. He was the determined executive who had built an empire. "What do I need to do for her to stay with me?" he asked directly. Karen seemed slightly taken aback by the change in tone. "Well, there are procedures to become a temporary or permanent guardian, evaluations, interviews, background checks." "I am willing to go through all of it," Declan said firmly. "I want to formally apply for custody of Isabella. Temporary or permanent, whatever is possible." The social workers looked at each other again, and Declan realized his sudden determination had surprised them. "Mr. Westbrook," David said cautiously, "becoming a child's guardian is not a decision one makes on a whim. It is a huge responsibility." "I know exactly what I'm asking for," Declan interrupted, "and I am prepared to take on that responsibility." Karen studied his face for a moment, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. "You can begin the process," she said finally, "but I must warn you that it is lengthy and rigorous, and there are no guarantees." "I understand," Declan replied. "Declan, but I will do everything in my power." "For now," David added, "we still need to follow protocol. Isabella will have to come with us today." The reality of those words hit Declan like a cold wave. Today, they were taking her today. "Can I at least prepare her?" he asked, his voice almost pleading. "Can I explain what's happening?" "She's been through so much," Karen nodded sympathetically. "Of course, and you can help her gather her things. We will also allow regular visits while the custody process is evaluated." Declan stood up from the table, feeling both numb and hyper-alert. He walked back to the living room, where Isabella was still partially hidden behind the armchair, watching everything with attentive eyes. He knelt to be at her level. "Isabella," he began softly, "we need to talk." She emerged slightly from her hiding spot, still clutching Mr. Buttons. "Who are they?" she whispered. "They're people who help children," Declan explained, choosing his words carefully. They came to make sure you're okay." "I'm okay here," she replied immediately, her eyes filling with tears. "With you." The lump in Declan's throat grew, making it hard to speak. "I know, but there are rules. They need to take you to a special place for a little while." Isabella's face turned pale. "The place with lots of kids with no parents." "Something like that," Declan admitted, hating himself for not being able to protect her from this. "But it's temporary. I'm doing everything I can so you can come back." Her lips trembled. "Promise." Declan wanted to promise. More than anything in the world, he wanted to guarantee her that everything would be okay, but he couldn't lie. "I promise I will do everything I can," he said finally. "Absolutely everything." Isabella looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then, surprisingly, she reached her arms out to him. Declan hugged her, feeling her small body tremble against his. "Let's pack your things," he said gently when they separated. "And Mr. Buttons, of course." He helped her put her clothes and the few belongings in the backpack she had brought, now accompanied by a small suitcase with the new clothes they had bought together. Isabella remained silent throughout the process, just holding the teddy bear tightly to her chest. When they returned to the living room, the social workers were waiting patiently. Karen smiled at Isabella, who partially hid behind Declan's leg. "Hello, Isabella," Karen said gently. "My name is Karen. We're going to take a little trip today, all right?" Isabella didn't answer, just hugged the teddy bear tighter. "She can take Mr. Buttons, right?" Declan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Of course," David replied. "She can take all her personal belongings." Declan knelt again, lightly holding Isabella's shoulders. "Remember what I said? This is temporary. And I will visit you whenever they let me. She nodded, a tear rolling down her small face. I need you to be strong now, Declan continued, his own voice nearly breaking. Like the little tree, remember? That brought a trembling smile from Isabella. It bends but doesn't break, she whispered. Exactly. When it was time to leave, Isabella slowly walked over to Karen, who gently extended her hand. Before stepping out the door, she turned one last time. Do I have to go? She asked in a whisper, her eyes fixed on Declan, pleading for a different answer. The simple question pierced his heart. He opened his mouth, wanting to say no, that she could stay, that everything would be fine. But the words wouldn't come, because it would be a lie, and he had promised himself never to lie to her. Declan couldn't answer. Isabella seemed to understand his silence. She looked down and followed the social workers to the elevator. Before the doors closed, Declan saw her small face one last time, her blue eyes shining with unshed tears. And then she was gone. The apartment suddenly felt too big, too empty. The silence that once comforted him now suffocated him. Declan walked back to the living room, noticing Isabella's drawings still scattered on the table. One of them showed two figures holding hands, one big and one small under a smiling sun. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer. I need you here, now, he said, his voice regaining its firmness, and bring someone who specializes in family law. He spent the next few hours in meetings, making calls, leveraging all his considerable connections and resources. By the time night fell, he had a detailed plan and an entire team working on the case. But even with all the activity, the apartment remained empty, without Isabella's light footsteps, without her curious questions, without Mr. Buttons supervising everything from his special spot on the sofa. Declan dismissed the lawyers around 10 o'clock at night. He was alone, sitting in the living room armchair, looking at the empty sofa where Isabella had slept the first few nights. The small impression her body had left on the blanket was still there. He couldn't sleep that night. He remained in the armchair, mentally replaying everything that had happened in the last 10 days. How his organized and predictable life had been completely transformed by the arrival of a small child with a teddy bear. He thought about everything he had built over the years, his company, his fortune, his empire. He had always believed that was what mattered. He had always been afraid of depending on someone, of making space in his life for another person. Control was his mantra, his religion. But now, looking at the empty sofa, Declan realized a truth he had never considered before. Maybe he couldn't bear to lose her. This child who had entered his life by chance, who had awakened feelings he didn't even know he could still feel. The dawn found him still awake, his eyes burning with fatigue, but with a fierce determination growing inside him. No matter what it cost, no matter how long it took, he would bring Isabella back home. Because, somehow, inexplicably, in just 10 days, that quiet little girl with a worn-out teddy bear had become the most important thing in his life. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the guest room, creating golden patterns on the floor. Declan had finally managed to bring Isabella back home after 3 days of intense legal battles. His lawyer had obtained an emergency temporary custody order, arguing that the bond already established between them would be harmed by an abrupt separation. It was only a temporary victory, Declan knew. The social workers made it clear that there would be evaluations, home visits, and court hearings in the coming months. But for now, Isabella was back in the apartment, sleeping in the room that was now officially hers. Declan prepared breakfast carefully, pancakes with small marshmallows on the side, just as he had promised. The hot chocolate steamed in the mugs, a large one for him, a smaller one for her. In the 3 days they were apart, he had redecorated the room, painting one wall a soft purple and adding a bookshelf with children's books. The need to do something, anything, to bring her back had been almost unbearable. When he heard the light footsteps in the hallway, he felt a wave of relief. It was still real. She was really back. Isabella appeared at the kitchen door, her hair messy from sleep, wearing her purple pajamas. Mr. Buttons, as always, accompanied her. Her eyes seemed larger, more solemn than before. "Good morning," Declan smiled, trying to keep his tone light. "Sleep well," she nodded, approaching slowly, "I missed my bed," she said softly, and Declan understood she meant the bed in his apartment. The idea that she considered this place her home made his heart tighten. "I made pancakes, and look," he pointed to the marshmallows, "magic boats for the hot chocolate." A small smile appeared on Isabella's face. She climbed onto the chair and looked at the plate with interest. "Thank you," she murmured, picking up her fork. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Declan noticed that Isabella seemed to want to say something but was hesitant. Several times she looked at him and then quickly looked away. "Is everything okay?" he asked gently. "You can tell me anything, you know that." Isabella bit her lower lip, a gesture Declan had learned to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "Can I get my backpack? I want to show you something." "Of course," Declan replied, curious. "Want me to get it for you?" "No," she shook her head, sliding off the chair. "I'll go." Isabella left the kitchen, her quick footsteps echoing down the hall. Declan heard her rummaging through something in the room, and then she returned, holding the same old backpack she had arrived with, some of the few belongings she had from her old home. She sat down again, placing the backpack on her lap. She looked at Declan with a disconcerting seriousness for someone so small. "When I was in that place," she began, referring to the temporary shelter, "I was scared I'd never come back. I promised I would do everything to bring you back," Declan reminded her gently. "I know," she nodded, "but a lot of grown-ups promise things." The simplicity of the observation and the implicit distrust in her words hurt Declan, but he understood. How many promises had already been broken in her short life? "At the place, there was a girl who said maybe you wouldn't want me anymore," Isabella continued, fiddling with the backpack's zipper. "That grown-ups always send kids away." Declan felt a lump in his throat. "That's not true. I wanted you back every minute we were apart." Isabella studied his face for a moment, as if searching for the truth in his features. Then, seemingly satisfied with what she saw, she opened the backpack. "The social worker lady said you're trying to be my guardian," she said, the word clearly new to her vocabulary. "Yes," Declan confirmed. "I'm doing everything I can so you can stay with me permanently." Isabella nodded again, absorbing the information. Then, carefully, she pulled something out of the backpack. It was a photograph, folded and a bit worn at the edges, as if it had been held many times. "Mommy always said I needed a good daddy," she explained, smoothing the photograph with her small fingers. "She said that one day I would meet someone special who would take care of me." Declan listened, surprised by the revelation. "How do you think she meant you?" Isabella asked, looking at him with those huge, solemn eyes. I don't know," Declan answered honestly. "How could I?" Isabella considered this for a moment, then carefully unfolded the photograph. "This is my mommy," she said, holding the photo out to him. "What do you think she would have liked you?" Declan took the photograph carefully, curious to see the woman who had raised a child as incredible as Isabella. When his eyes fell on the image, however, he felt as if the floor had vanished from beneath his feet. The world around him seemed to disappear. The sound of the traffic below, the ticking of the clock on the wall. Everything dissolved into a stunned silence as he stared at the face in the photograph. Evelyn. Not just any Evelyn, but his Evelyn. The smile he knew so well, the eyes that held the same intensity as Isabella's, the brown hair that fell in waves over her shoulders. It was a more recent photo, of course. Evelyn looked to be in her late 20s, not the 20-year-old girl he had known in college, but it was unmistakably her. "Are you okay?" Isabella's voice brought him back to reality. "Why are you crying?" Declan hadn't even realized that tears had started streaming down his face. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He began, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I knew your mommy, Isabella." The girl's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," Declan nodded, still looking at the photograph and unable to tear his gaze away. "We were very close when we were young." "Were you friends?" Isabella asked, leaning forward, a new light of interest in her eyes. Declan looked up from the photograph to Isabella's face. How had he not noticed before? The same eyes, the same shape of her face. Even the way she tilted her head when she was curious. It all reminded him of Evelyn. "We were more than friends," he answered honestly, feeling he owed it to Isabella and to Evelyn. "We dated for a while, in college." Isabella's eyes filled with an almost painful curiosity. You dated my mommy." Declan nodded, feeling long-buried memories awaken as if they had happened yesterday. The first meeting in the library, the walks across campus holding hands, the discussions about the future, about dreams, about what they wanted from life. "Yes," he said softly. "I loved her very much." Isabella processed the information slowly, her expression a mixture of confusion and something resembling hope. "Why did you stop dating?" she finally asked. It was a simple question, but the answer was too complex for a 5-year-old. How could he explain that he had chosen ambition over love? That when Evelyn spoke of moving to a small town, of working with art and education instead of pursuing wealth and status, he had been terrified at the thought of giving up his plans. "We had different ideas about what we wanted from life," he replied, simplifying as much as possible. "I wanted one thing, and your mother wanted another." "And you had a fight?" Isabella asked, frowning. "Not exactly," Declan replied, remembering their last conversation. It hadn't been a fight. It had been worse, a slow drifting apart, a mutual but painful separation. "So we went our separate ways, and you never saw her again?" Declan shook his head. "No, I lost touch." Isabella was silent for a moment, looking at the photograph Declan still held. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "Mommy always said that nothing happens by accident," she commented. "She said that all the people we meet have a reason for coming into our lives." The simplicity and depth of the observation hit Declan like a wave. It sounded exactly like something Evelyn would say. Her philosophy had always been like that, finding meaning in connections, believing in intertwined destinies. "She was right," Declan said softly. "Your mother was always very wise." Isabella reached out, touching the photograph lightly. "Do you think that's why I found you? Because Mommy wanted me to?" The innocent question carried an immense weight. Declan looked at Isabella's hopeful face and at Evelyn's image, feeling something click into place inside him, a piece of a puzzle he didn't even know he was assembling. Maybe," he answered honestly. "I can't explain how, out of all the people on that busy street, you chose me to ask for help." "I already told you." Isabella smiled shyly. "You looked sad, like me, and you had eyes like my mommy's." The coincidence, if it was just that, seemed too great to be ignored. Declan looked at the photograph again, at Evelyn's face, and felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Sadness for the loss of someone who had once meant so much, regret for the paths not taken, and a strange feeling that, somehow, Evelyn had found a way to reconnect them, even after her departure. "My mommy would like you now," Isabella stated with the certainty only children possess. "You're different from what she used to say." "She talked about me?" Declan asked, surprised. "Sometimes," Isabella nodded. "She had a picture of you too, a really old one. She said you were very smart, but that you only thought about money and work." Declan couldn't help a small, sad smile. She wasn't wrong. "But you're not like that anymore," Isabella continued, with the same certainty. "Now you take care of me." The simplicity of the observation touched something deep in Declan. It was true. He had changed. In just a few weeks, his priorities had completely shifted. The empire he had built, the money he had accumulated, it all seemed secondary now. "Can I keep the photo?" he asked, surprising himself. Isabella hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "But you have to give it back later. It's the only one I have of her smiling like that." "I promise," Declan replied, carefully putting the picture away. They finished breakfast in a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Isabella seemed lighter, as if sharing that secret had lifted a weight from her small shoulders. Later, after Isabella went to get dressed, Declan stood alone in the kitchen looking at Evelyn's photograph again. The realization hit him with full force. It wasn't just compassion for a helpless child that motivated him. It was something deeper, more complex. He felt he owed a debt to Evelyn for choosing a path that separated them, for not being there when she needed him, for not having known Isabella from the beginning. But it was more than that. He also owed a debt to the part of himself that had been left in the past, the young man who was once capable of loving without reservation, of dreaming beyond numbers on a spreadsheet, of seeing value in things that couldn't be quantified or bought. That night, after he put Isabella to bed, Declan stood for a long time looking out the window at the illuminated city below. He had made countless difficult decisions in his professional life, faced ruthless competitors, navigated financial crises. But nothing compared to the decision he was making now. With Evelyn's photograph in one hand and a drawing by Isabella in the other, Declan decided he would fight for this child, no matter the cost. Not just out of obligation, not just out of compassion, but because, in some unexpected way, Isabella had become the most important person in his life. And maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to correct the choice he made so many years ago, when he chose ambition over love. The morning was clear but cold as Declan adjusted his tie in front of the mirror. His reflection showed a different man from just 2 months ago. Something had changed in his eyes. "Are you nervous?" asked Thomas, his lawyer, as he organized the documents. "More than I've ever been," Declan admitted, looking at the imposing stone building through the car window. 6 weeks had passed since the revelation about Evelyn. 6 weeks of intense preparation, psychological evaluations, visits from social workers, and countless meetings with lawyers. The temporary custody had been extended, allowing Isabella to continue living with him while the adoption process ran its course. Karen, the social worker who had become an unexpected ally, was waiting for them on the courthouse steps. Beside her was Isabella, wearing a simple purple dress, her hair in a neat braid. Mr. Buttons, as always, was in her arms. "Good morning," Declan smiled, kneeling to be at Isabella's level. "Did you sleep well at Karen's house?" Isabella nodded. They had agreed it would be better for her to spend the previous night with the social worker to avoid any appearance of undue influence before the hearing. "You look beautiful," he commented, noticing how she looked both small and solemn in her formal dress. "You too," she replied, adjusting his tie with her small fingers, a gesture she had learned to do on mornings when she saw him getting ready for important meetings. The hearing room was smaller and more welcoming than Declan had imagined. Isabella was taken to an adjacent room by a child psychologist, where she would wait until she was called. "I'll be right here," Declan assured her when she hesitated at the door, "and we'll be together again soon." Isabella clutched Mr. Buttons to her chest and followed the psychologist, looking back one last time. Judge Harrington was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a stern expression, but surprisingly kind eyes. After the initial formalities, it was Declan's turn to speak. "Mr. Westbrook," the judge began, "I understand you are petitioning for the full adoption of Isabella Crawford. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Declan replied, his voice firm. "And could you explain to the court how you came to know the child?" Declan took a deep breath and began to tell the story, how Isabella had approached him on that cold night, how he had felt an immediate responsibility to protect her, how a bond had slowly formed between them. "And subsequently," the judge continued, "it was discovered that you knew the child's biological mother." "Yes, Your Honor. Evelyn Crawford and I were very close during college." "Can you elaborate on that relationship?" "Evelyn and I dated for almost 2 years," he began, feeling long dormant memories surface. "So she was studying art and education, I business and finance. We were very different, but somehow we complemented each other." "And what happened to that relationship?" "We broke up when we were graduating," Declan explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Evelyn wanted to follow a more meaningful path, to work with children, to make a difference in small communities. I was obsessed with corporate success, with building a fortune." "And you lost contact with her?" "Completely," Declan admitted, "something I deeply regret now." The judge studied him before continuing. "Mr. Westbrook, the social worker's report mentions that you are a single man, dedicated to your work, with no prior experience with children. What makes you believe you are prepared to raise Isabella?" "Your Honor, "I won't pretend to know everything about being a father," he began, choosing his words carefully. "And yes, my life before was centered on work. But Isabella changed that. She changed everything." Declan paused, searching for the right words. "Evelyn was important in my life, not just as a girlfriend, but as someone who tried to show me there was more to the world than financial success. At the time, I wasn't ready to listen, but I think a part of me always knew she was right." The judge watched him intently without interrupting. "Isabella came into my life at a time when I had everything I thought I wanted, yet I still felt empty. She didn't just fill that void, she showed me it was bigger than I had imagined. In just a few weeks, she became an essential part of who I am today." "And how exactly do you plan to balance your demanding career with raising a child?" the judge asked. "I've already started making significant changes," Declan explained. "I've delegated several responsibilities, hired a COO to manage the day-to-day operations of the company. I'm working from home 3 days a week, and Isabella is already enrolled in a school near our apartment." The questioning continued for nearly an hour. Questions about values, education, plans for the future. Declan answered each one with a sincerity that surprised even himself. When the judge finally said he would like to meet Isabella, Declan felt a wave of anxiety. The psychologist brought Isabella into the room. She seemed even smaller in the formal setting, but walked with a surprising dignity for a 5-year-old. "Hello, Isabella," the judge smiled, softening his expression. "Do you know why we're all here today?" She nodded seriously. "To decide if I can stay with Declan forever." "And is that what you want?" Isabella looked at Declan before answering. "Yes, he takes care of me, and I take care of him too." The judge smiled at the response. "And how do you take care of him?" "I remind him to eat when he's working too hard," she explained seriously. "And sometimes he gets sad thinking about Mommy, so I show him the drawings I made to make him happy again." A soft murmur went through the room. Even the state's attorney seemed touched. "I see," the judge nodded. "And do you miss your mother?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she maintained her composure. "Every day. But Declan helps me remember her in a way that doesn't hurt so much." Then came the moment no one had anticipated. Isabella got down from her chair and walked over to where Declan was sitting. Without a word, she reached out her hand to him. When Declan held Isabella's small hand, a profound silence fell over the room. It wasn't the formal silence of a courtroom, but something more significant, as if everyone present could see, in that simple gesture, the depth of the bond that had formed between them. It was undeniable. There they were, visible to anyone. Not just a wealthy man trying to do a good deed and a needy child in want of a home. They were two people who, somehow, had found in each other exactly what they needed. Judge Harrington looked at the scene for a long moment. Then he smiled. "I believe I've seen enough," he declared. "I would like to speak with the attorneys in my chambers." 2 hours later, Declan and Isabella walked out of the courthouse hand in hand. The adoption had been granted. There would be a 6-month probationary period with regular visits from the social worker. But the judge had made it clear that, barring extraordinary circumstances, the decision was final. Isabella was now officially Isabella Crawford Westbrook. On the way home, Isabella was unusually quiet. "Is everything okay?" Declan asked, looking at her in the rearview mirror. "Can we visit Mommy?" she asked suddenly. "I want to tell her." Declan immediately understood what she meant. "Of course." "We can go now if you'd like." The cemetery was on the outskirts of the city, a quiet place with old trees. Declan had never been there before, but Isabella guided him without hesitation among the headstones until they reached a simple one, made of light marble. "Evelyn Marie Crawford, 1985-2024, love remains." Declan felt a tightness in his chest as he saw the dates. She had passed away so young, just a few months ago. Questions that would never be answered hung in his mind. Had Evelyn tried to find him? Had she thought of him over the years? Isabella had brought a single flower, a daisy picked from the courthouse garden. She placed it carefully on the headstone and then knelt on the grass. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice small but clear in the cemetery's silence. "I have someone now, you can rest." The simplicity and depth of her words made Declan have to turn his face to hide the tears that threatened to fall. When he managed to compose himself, Isabella was already standing again, looking at him. "She's listening," she said with the certainty only children possess. "She's happy." Declan nodded, unable to speak. He held out his hand, which Isabella took firmly. They walked back to the car together, passing between the headstones under the golden late afternoon light. A father and a daughter. A family formed not by blood, but by something equally powerful: choice, commitment, love. Declan looked down at the small hand in his and felt a certainty he had never experienced before. After years of building a financial empire, accumulating wealth and power, he had finally found what he had always been searching for without knowing it: a purpose greater than himself, a genuine connection, a family. And somewhere, Declan wanted to believe, Evelyn was watching. Perhaps smiling in that way he had never completely forgotten, as if she knew something the rest of them were still yet to discover. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.